Whispers in the Wind. Hello, and welcome to Whispers in the Wind, a podcast where your story has a voice. Today, I'm with the amazing Laura Jury, a founder of the theatre group the South Devon Players. In this episode, we explore her story about how she overcame trials to achieve her dream life rooted in theatre. We explore how she carried on thriving through some of the pitfalls of the industry, whilst managing her experiences of racism and isolation, which started when she was only a child. This is her story. What is your story?
So on a personal level, I've always lived down here in South Devon, which is it's a beautiful place to live in, with the countryside and the coast and a slower way of living, and it's all very nice. I've also always wanted, from as far back as I could remember, to get involved in theatre and acting and performance. And that's where there's a bit of a challenge, because there's not an awful lot down here. And there are some very good amateur groups, but when you want to make a career out of it, that's where you can hit a glass ceiling. And when you're looking at working further out of the area or connecting further out of the area, there can be very interesting reactions, and a lot of creative people down here have experienced the same. And the old saying down here in Devon is that so many people believe that there's no professional theatre or performance west of Bristol, and that is very much the case, with outside views of it. In fact, I was backstage doing something in London a few years ago, and as a member of the stage crew asked me where I was from, and I said, "Oh, I'm up here from Devon." And they said, "Are there actors in Devon? I thought you were all farmers and druids." And I thought that summed up the mindset perfectly. Yeah. So there is a lot of stereotyping with regard to regional theatre not being as high quality, not being professional, not being serious, that you have to contend with. So yeah, that's one of the really big challenges.
Right. Let's actually start at the beginning. When did you actually fall in love with theatre in its entirety, in its core?
Now, this is one of the really funny questions. Loads of people ask me that, and I always say I can't tell you, because it's always just been something that I've naturally gravitated to and wanted to do, right back as far as I can remember. And that, but no, there was never a particular point where I suddenly decided. It was always just there.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about your childhood here. What I want to talk about is, as someone who is of mixed heritage, has autism, and was, I guess, in a way, maybe had more challenges in understanding who they were in growing up and everything. How was life as a child for you? How was your childhood?
In some ways, with regard to that, it could be quite confusing. So I went to primary school for about a year, and I never understood why I was always the naughty child, the difficult one, or if one of the other children had done something, I'd be the one told off. I never understood it. In the end, Mum took me out and homeschooled me, and that was really the best thing that happened on that. So really, and at that age, it just made absolutely no sense as to what was going on, and I couldn't understand what I'd done. Honestly, I didn't really bother about race or anything like that. I'd not seen anyone who wasn't white for many years as a child. It was only sort of much later on a bus, I think, if I remember rightly. So I knew people of other colours existed, but I didn't, and it was something that wasn't really a conscious thing for me. I wasn't paying attention to it. There was a very odd incident it was odd to me then. I was on the bus, and I've always liked fresh air and lots of breezes and that. I don't like enclosed spaces, so I wanted the window on the bus open. And there was a couple there that got very, very angry with me, particularly that I wanted the window open, and they were shouting at me. And and Mum was explaining that, bearing in mind this is in the 1980s, that, they're from South Africa, they do things differently there, so they think you need to have the window closed, and you need to do what they say. And I said, well, why are they more important than I am? And later on I discovered it was because of certain racial issues that existed in South Africa at the time, and they were here on holiday, Mum explained to me, so they weren't used to things here. So it was things like that I sort of never understood. As a teen, as an adult, I understood why. But at that age, I was as confused as anything. Yeah. So I ended up, other than my interests and acting in that, being very much a child who kept to myself. So, in fact, some people locally at one point did call social services on Mum, saying, well, why isn't Laura going out playing with other children? And Mum was like, well, she doesn't want to. And then the social workers who came to visit asked me, and I said, no, I don't want to. You're not going to make me.
Everyone's different in that respect. That's really cool. I mean, I guess talking from my own experience, I love my alone time. I still do. I still love sort of being with myself and in my own space. I think there's a sense of meditation in there where you're just happy, you're relaxed, and I can understand that. Not everyone is outgoing. It's fine.
No, I mean, I can be, and that, but I also need a lot of time for me. And as an adult, that often involves going off on long country walks, cliff walks, going out to really remote beaches and area, and just getting away from it all. I'll have my work, because I'm also a workaholic. So with the advent of mobile phones and that, I've got the internet with me, I've got everything with me. But it's just, I can work on it and also enjoy the peace.
So if that was your childhood, how was life sort of more into the teenage years?
I decided to do drama at college in my late teens. I found that a lot of people, unfortunately, were looking at it as an easy option, as opposed to something to actually train for as work. And I got very, very frustrated with that, and I ended up leaving. I spent a year sort of floating around on the dole, just wondering what to do with myself. And then I decided, well, at that point I'd been put off acting because of how the college course was, but I wanted to be involved in something creative. So I managed to get a place at a regional university doing film and TV production. So I went off and did that, and while I was doing that, I got pulled back into doing theatre, and then I never looked back. So when I finished, I wasn't very well, and I'd moved back to Brixham, and then I was involved in some local amateur theatre, and I met some other people in the pub from the same theatre group, and we were all complaining that there was nothing to do professionally in the area, and we were all getting very fed up. And we had quite a few meetings sort of just complaining about this, sitting there over drinks, wishing our lives away. And then we were very, very drunk one evening, and I said, well, we can either sit here and complain for the rest of our lives, or we can do something about it. And what about starting up our own theatre company? Well, born of a very drunken idea, that's how South Devon Players started, with 4 of us, and we've been going ever since. That was 17 years ago now. So yes, we have our ups and downs and struggles, and on the whole, it's growing absolutely brilliantly. The talent down here, the hidden talent, is absolutely amazing. It's brilliant. And, we get some people who've moved down here for various reasons and then found no theatre, nothing to get involved in, then they've suddenly found us and had a whole new lease of life. We've also got people who are absolutely new to acting, stepping in for the first time. And it's a total range of ages and backgrounds, and it's really coming together so well now. So yeah, that's it in a major nutshell, basically.
Okay, that's amazing. I mean, for your own theatre company, what kind of theatre do you create?
When we started, one of the first things we decided is what we were going to focus on. Now, we wanted to do something that wouldn't stand on the toes of theatre groups. I include amateur, professional, everything. We didn't want to stand on toes locally. We wanted to do something that was our own within that. And we also then looked at the interests of the people starting it, and that very much centred around history, classical literature, and that type of thing. And to be fair, most of the amateur groups either do musicals, Rodgers and Hammerstein's type things, a panto once a year, that sort of thing. So we found that what we were interested in doing was actually a whole new niche anyway. And so that was kind of the decision. Very early on, we started initially with just local history to get interest up. Then we found ourselves expanding into wider national and European literature as well, which is absolutely fine because things grow and they change. We then, for quite a few years, we've toyed with the idea of having a spin-off arm where we've got professional training for actors and performers. We've experimented a couple of times and it's failed. And then this year, we were able to get some grant funding in conjunction with a local theatre. So we're now running monthly training classes down there. We've decided it's probably not going to be something for the summer because people want to go off and do other things in the summer, especially down here. But we're going to have a winter school every year. So the education arm's linking up, and we're also linking with schools and universities in the region as well. So we're now expanding that education side and having two arms of the organisation.
That's amazing. So it's like the winter wonderland of acting then, in a way.
Yes.
That's amazing. Because I was actually looking at something and I saw one of the cores for your company, your theatre company, the South Devon Players, and I've got it here actually. It goes, to showcase and develop the wonderful talents of regional Southwest performers at all stages of their careers and experience to local, national and international audiences while providing local people, regardless of past experience or demographic identities, with local opportunities to develop and grow careers in theatre. I think it's amazing because you're giving access to everyone in this art form. And what I've noticed is you are a multi-award winning theatre company. I've seen it. You've won the Bricks Award 2019. You won the 2019 Long Island Awards. So this core. Would you say that is a fundamental reason for your success as a theatre company?
We've got a really tight core. It's changed over the years. I have to say that the core it develops and changes a bit, over the years. But there is a really strong, tight core of people within the group, and then we have people that come in maybe for every other show or one-off shows or a particular type of show that interests them. Absolutely fine. And then we've got people who come in on a one-off basis. It's all fine, and it's that strength and that variety that's a strength, because if so many theatre companies, and again it's another stereotype, have secret precasting, to put it very bluntly, where they've decided already before they cast who they're actually going to have. And so a lot of people feel disempowered to get involved with a group if they see too much of the same every time. So I think it's a real strength to have new people involved and a sort of swap around of who's the lead on different things as well, because hopefully it shows people on the outside that actually anyone is welcome, because they are. There is a lot of fighting stereotypes that has to go on.
No, I actually I'm going to come back to that fighting stereotypes in a few moments, because I think that's actually a big key in your story from what I know. Because obviously right now in your how it's all going, it's a very happy place. You've got success, you're doing what you love, and you're living your dream. And I think not many people can say that, and I think you're one of them that can say, hey, I'm living my dream, and it's amazing. But it wasn't always this way, was it?
No, and sometimes it isn't. Sometimes there are real challenging times. You do have times where it's hard to find people to get involved other than that core. But without other people coming in, it can't carry on anyway. So we're permanently short-handed with people. There's a lot. There are the stereotypes and that which they do affect the ability to get funding. They affect sometimes the ability to get venues or that type of thing. So there's quite a lot of challenge in that way. On the other hand, yes, we are living the dream by creating the type of work and doing what we love doing, basically. So yeah, it's all swings and roundabouts, really. But there's been many times, quite honestly, when I've sat down and thought, I need to give this up. I need to walk away and go and get a 9-to-5. And then I think, well, what would I do in a 9-to-5 job? If I gave up acting, if I gave up freelancing as a performer, if I gave up the theatre company, if I gave all this up, what would I go and do? And I think, well, actually, I can't imagine doing anything else. So I'm kind of stuck, but in a good way.
I get that. I mean, I think every artist experiences this, and actually, just as your opinion, would you say being an artist is very much a love-hate relationship with your actual craft?
Yes. Oh, it is. Big time.
Everyone thinks you love your craft, you beat on it, and it's like, nah, there are days I want to say, no, I don't want to do this because you feel like crap.
Yes, absolutely. You can be very physically tired if you've been rushing around with a lot of things. You can have had a problem arising from one of the stereotypes, which can make you feel really, really down and start really questioning yourself. You can have days where somebody said to you, a common one I get is, because we have to exist on sharing the money made from the ticket sales and that, and we don't have lots and lots of funding coming in, people will say to me, well, why aren't you bothering to get lots of funding in? And that, and I say, well, actually, there's a stack of applications that go out. You know, we're trying, but what people see is that we're not getting it. So, you know, and then it comes back, and you get sort of rocketed for not making an effort. This is all the sort of outside stuff, and you end up feeling sort of really bad about it. And if you're down with a bad cold or the flu or something, there's no one else to pick up the pieces. So at that point, it's quite difficult, and you're having to muddle along. And yes, the amount of times over the years that I've been laid in bed and still working on the laptop, and yeah.
Within creating the theatre group and doing the performances and everything, right at the beginning, what were some of the more personal challenges that you yourself experienced within this journey?
I think it was one that actually I find goes on forever. It doesn't matter how long you've been at this, is always having to be willing and able to learn new skills, new ways of doing things, keeping up to date with changes in the theatre acting industry, not just for yourself, but also for everybody else that you're working with as well. Because when you're basically the admin for a theatre company, you're also the one who's responsible for everybody else's well-being, safety, the success of the show, and in many ways your professional reputation and other people's as well. So there's actually, when you break it down, a lot of things to consider. And again, some days it's absolutely fine, and you think, yes, I can do this. Other days, not really. But it's not so much a beginning challenge. That's a challenge that goes on forever. I think the personal challenge when I started it didn't feel a challenge at the time, but I think there was still a lot of starry-eyed idealism going there, because I can remember saying things like, oh, in 10 years, I bet we'll be performing in London and doing stuff like that. Well, we're 17 years on, and other than streaming, we stream globally, but as for physical performances, oh no.
But everyone has that, you know, everyone starts with that intention. I think it's a good thing, but you don't think you're there quite yet. But is that something you're trying to aim for right now?
Oh yes, yeah, it's still something that I'd jump on, that if we had the opportunity, and it's not so much with venues, it's more the logistics and the costs of getting everyone there. then oh yes, we go for it immediately. You know, I'm not going to hold back on when opportunities come, and in fact, I'm always looking for them and searching them out. And networking, talking to people, is almost a daily task.
I can imagine. I can imagine. I guess the other thing I wanna talk about is obviously you're very unique in the respect of you're making theatre and everything else, and one of the challenges I believe you might have experienced is with your autism.
Yes. I mean, a lot. They say a lot of autistic people have a passion in life, a special interest, a real focus, and mine is most definitely acting and theatre. So on a sort of focus base, that's not so much a problem. I think where it gets challenging is the interpersonal communications, because when I started, I wasn't very open about being autistic. I wouldn't say about that to a lot of people, and so people would automatically go, "Well, Laura's a bit weird. She's a bit eccentric," and that, and unfortunately, sometimes people would see that as a bad thing, or go, "Well, Laura's acting slightly differently than we'd expect. Maybe that's something bad. Maybe she's up to something." So I'd get sort of told off for doing things that I didn't even know I'd done. And to this day, I've still not worked out what actually I was supposed to have done because of that difference. People are very understandably in theatre and performance, because of all the scammers, the very dodgy things that happen. People are always on their guard, you know, and they're looking for that thing that's a little bit different, that's a little bit out of place, and that's a big red flag. Again, highly understandably so. When I decided to be open about it, which was a lot more recently, I found then that, yes, you still get stereotyping and negative reactions, but there were a lot less. People were like, "Oh, that's why. That's why." And actually, this works, this approach. Now we understand the why. This approach actually works, it's fine. So there are benefits to it. There is also a big benefit that because of the differences, we tend to people watch a lot. And so you're watching how people react, body language, facial expressions, tone of voice in this, probably a lot more consciously. And that is then very useful both as an actor and as a director for creating characters and directing performance and creating performance. So I think there are a lot of strengths in there, actually.
So you would definitely see your autism as a big asset more than a hindrance.
Yes, yeah.
Because that's very important. A lot of people don't see that.
No, I think I've always seen thinking outside the box, which is what it boils down to, as a strength. I think it can be difficult when I'm going into meetings, networking events, and especially sort of something very corporate or very formal. Then it sort of falls down a little bit, because then sort of anxiety, worries about appearing professional sort of almost take over. And so, sometimes I end up sort of barely saying a word, and then that really doesn't help. So there are weaknesses to it, but there are a lot of strengths.
Okay, I see. That's actually amazing. Okay, if that's the case, I guess what I want to know is, so you said you're from Devon, and I'm assuming that's where the company actually does a lot of its work, in Devon.
Yes, we have our rehearsals here in Brixham in a local community centre, and then we perform usually the first performance, not always, it does change slightly from some shows, in our local theatre in Brixham, and then we go out to other venues around South Devon. We have pushed the bounds up to Bristol and into Cornwall, but after last summer, with all the costs and that of everything going up, we had to scale it back and say, this is financially unsustainable. We can't raise the money for a minibus to go to Bristol or down to Penzance. It's not even just not feasible. The money doesn't exist, because we exist fundraising with second-hand bits on eBay and sponsored walks and these sorts of things. So you can't afford to go further afield. So, yes, at the moment we're physically stuck in South Devon and we do our work here. But on the very plus side, what we have discovered is streaming online. We film our shows. We don't stream live, but we record them, then we put nice titles, nice credits on the end, and then we make them available online. And that's where we can then reach national and international audiences. So, yeah, we might be stuck physically, but we're working on reaching people in other ways around the world.
You're always thinking ahead. I think that's an amazing quality to have. Doesn't matter what you do, the ability to think ahead and find solutions regardless of what you do, that is more important, and I think the key thing to have when you have challenges. I mean, find a way around them, and you're a spitting image of that. So that's amazing. How did the actual environment, how did the people of Devon take to that?
So we found it's very much a case of having to prove yourself. When we started in the back room of a social club, which now doesn't exist. And initially it was viewed very much as something very odd, to be fair. Sometimes we'd turn up to rehearse and find that the room had been booked out to somebody else. Because people weren't it's just the drama group, they can go somewhere else. When we did our first show, I think we performed to about 5 people. And it was all a case of building that reputation up and just keeping on pushing. Because one of the things down here, and one of the other very good things about doing classical literature, history and that type of thing, is that people will mainly be attracted to things where they know what to expect. They know what to expect with the organisation, they know what to expect with the story. So if you do something that people don't automatically recognise, you just won't get the audiences, you won't get the interest. The same actually goes with casting and crewing as well for it. So, yeah. But, you've just got to keep building up that reputation constantly, creating the work and showing the feedback from last time.
Okay, I'm with you. One of the things I discovered about Devon, it's a very nice place. I agree, it's very scenic, very nice, peaceful. But there were a few things I saw in the news about Devon, particularly in Plymouth, the Plymouth side of Devon, where there was racism and the Black Lives Matter movement happened. And I saw videos and documentaries about it and everything. How did that make you feel when that actually happened? And did that inspire any of your work?
It's not really linked in particularly. I think in some ways we were ahead of the curve because we've always been very inclusive to people of any background, any ethnicity. And that's been the rule from day one when we started. And I think it was more vindication that actually other people do feel that way. You do get pushback sometimes. We've just done a production of Beowulf, which is an old Viking Saxon legend. And the fact that we'd openly said we're open to all ethnicities, all backgrounds and that type of thing did get some pushback from, I think, fairly far right-minded people who said, well, you're an affront to the legend. Why are you doing this? It's all a load of woke nonsense. And that. So those sort of racist vibes certainly exist down here. And I think there's a lot of denial sometimes that it's happening, but I think in the past year, particularly, more people are talking about it, and it's coming to the fore, and I think people are getting a little bit more open-minded, to be brutally honest about it as well.
If they are opening their minds, that's the big thing. In that respect, then, within your production, the performances you do you do any work that might actually explore racism at all, or explore any of these themes even now?
As a general rule, it's not really a topic within the plays. However, with adaptations of classical literature, Shakespeare and stuff like that, sometimes terminology is used and language is used which is fairly outdated. And in that case, I certainly give a warning to say this is from a particular background. Having said that, last summer we did a stage production of Ben-Hur, which is of course set in Roman-occupied what is now Israel, Judea. And within the plot line of that, in fact, one of the driving forces within the story is racism and anti-Semitism against the main character. So I think, although it's not something that we focus upon as a topic for shows, I think sometimes it comes into the stories, and my one real ground rule on it is that it cannot be a desirable trait. It can't be a trait that is seen as part of a good character or something that isn't challenged within the story. So if a character says something racist or discriminatory or does something like that, then you also see the portrayal of that being challenged, or some kind of comeuppance is too strong, but a kind of challenging of that and it being shown to be a very negative thing. So while it's not a important thing within the plays, really, there's certainly a ground rule about how it's treated when it does show up in the stories.
Okay, I understand that. In that respect, then, have you personally ever experienced racism in your area?
Oh yes, yeah. In wider life, absolutely, because I'm mixed race, people make all sorts of the assumptions. I could be from about 10 different places around the planet, according to the assumptions. And sometimes you'll get people very surprised that I speak with an English accent. You'll get people sometimes come up and say, I've had people down here on holiday come up to me in the street and say, "Oh, we were trying to get away from all this multicultural nonsense, and here you are wandering around." That type of approach, which I usually give a cheeky answer back and say, "Well, I was born close by here. What are you? I'm more local than you are. Why are you coming out with this?" And that usually shuts them up because, of course, they've been looking at a stereotype that's not sort of worked out. There are assumptions about, you won't speak the language, you won't understand, you don't know what you're doing, and that are born from that. I saw a slight increase of that when we've done Shakespeare, for example, of all that language must be too challenging for you. Hang on, no, it isn't. Obviously, I mentioned the reactions to doing Beowulf, and some of that was back against me as well. And I mean, to be fair, the person that was attacking me for directing it got thrown out of the Facebook group that they were doing it on pretty quickly by the admins. Oh yes, yeah, but it still occurred, yeah. So oh yes, it happens. A local cultural thing, I have to say, is that people will deny there's anything like that in the area, and then so many people, especially those of a not totally white background, will turn around and say, "Well, hang on, I've experienced this, that, and the other." So yeah, so it's not done to say it happens locally, but it does.
The other question I have then is, with regards to, I guess, the experience of racism and people, how they treated you because of your autism or anything like that, is that still ongoing, or has that actually significantly reduced?
Oh no, I think that'll happen for eternity, in all honesty. Yes, once people get to know me, it sort of goes out of the window, and I've even had people who've initially been a little bit, off with it, and then as time's gone on, they've sort of totally relaxed, and it's all been fine, But then obviously there's new people who don't know. There's people with preconceptions. There's people who have negative views about it for whatever reason. So yes, I think there will always be a level of it, and it's just a part of life, unfortunately. I wish it wasn't, but yeah.
Do those experiences actually affect or influence your work at all?
On the creative side, they don't. But I do sometimes think that because of that, you have to work extra hard to prove you do know what you're doing. So in that way, I think Sometimes it can be a driving force to have to prove yourself more.
It's never the good thing. I completely understand. I guess in that respect, then. So how do you think you have developed from actually taking this sort of stuff, from when it first started happening to you to now? How was that journey in accepting yourself and understanding it does, you are who you are?
I think the first point, I was very much wondering, was it something personal that I was doing wrong? And I spent a lot of time sort of examining whatever I was doing, even down to the point of getting really stressed out about, am I walking down the road correctly? I was really getting quite paranoid about it. And then I started talking to other creatives, both in the UK and in the USA, and then finding actually this stuff happens to other people. It's not as personal. It's not just a just me thing that I need to work on. It's something on a bigger scale. And that, in many ways, actually helped. It's probably a very controversial thing to say, because especially where there's a lot more racism in America, and that you talk to people about this and they say, well, you shouldn't even be thinking like that. But where in America they'll say, okay, people who are racist need to fully accept that other people aren't like them, and I fully agree with that, and that a person of colour shouldn't be trying to fit in. This is the American take on it, that I've heard, and that white people should just turn round and accept. I find in a very non-diverse area that you've also got to, as a person who's not white, you've got to, sometimes you've got to be the one to reach out and start making that bridge. Because again, there are assumptions that over here that people are trying not to fit in. So
No, I understand. I can understand what you mean. How would you go about making that bridge?
do you know, it's the simplest things. It's being out and about. It's people seeing you as a local in the immediate area. It's going to a coffee shop. It's wandering around with the posters. It's popping in and out of the shops. It's stopping and talking to people. It's that sort of thing that starts creating that bridge. Yeah, that's the simplest way to do it.
Of course. I also, guess, have a bit of an obvious question. Theatre means everything to you. It's quite clear to see. And you have your own theatre company. When you understand and you sort of realize you have your own theatre company, do you ever just sort of sit back and let it simmer in your head, your successes and your journey?
I've always said that I love the successes and I'm incredibly happy with them. I don't think I'll ever be satisfied. Do you know what I mean? I'll always be looking for those new ways to improve on what we're doing. So feedback about what went really well in a show. This is especially from audiences as well as from people involved in acting and creative. On the acting and creative side, feedback about what worked really well, what we can improve on, is always really useful. Now, I'll take some things and work with it. Other things I'll go, oh, I really don't agree with that, But ultimately, I'm always looking for those new ways and new things to strive for. So, yeah, I've said I don't think I'd be satisfied if we had Oscars every year and a queue of people down the road for every show. I'd still be then looking at what can we expand, how can we build from that, I think.
That's amazing. Okay. Through all of this, through creating theatre, through understanding who you are and everything, how have you actually, from your childhood, grown as a person?
I think it would have been very easy with a lot of negative experiences, I think, to become very angry and bitter. And I've seen other people who've had difficult experiences in life do just that. I think it's very important to be conscious of that and keep overall, for all the difficult times and all the times that one's not positive. I think it's important to keep an overall positive, optimistic view on things. I've also learnt a lot of how to say no instead of being a people pleaser without asking questions. I'm still a people pleaser, but now I do say no, I do ask questions, and that it's all, for me, learning by experience, I have to say. I think, yeah, I'm honestly not sure what sort of a person I'd be if I wasn't involved in this type of thing. I'd probably be some very sort of alternative hippie out in the woods.
This is the number one reason I've done this show. If you were to give one piece of advice to someone listening who is going through a similar journey, but maybe only starting out, or is stuck within their theatre journey or arts journey, and they might be experiencing similar problems to you, they might have autism, they might not understand certain things, or they don't know where to go from where they are, what advice would you give them from your own personal learnings?
I'd say, first of all, whatever you do, don't give up on it. Don't throw your dreams out because you've hit a difficult point or a sticking point, because we all hit them, and sometimes they are massive. Sometimes there are times you can't see a way through it, and you don't know whether you're coming or going, and you're ending up in the doctors, on meds, all sorts of things from it. I think the important thing to remember is that ultimately a way through will come, and it's a case of looking creatively at what you can do. For example, where we can't tour nationally or internationally because of the finances, we've looked at streaming. There's often creative ways of doing things to get the work out there. Sometimes it's a case of going into a Facebook forum on that particular aspect and saying, hey guys, I'm struggling with this question, what do you think? And yes, you'll get all sorts of silly answers and that, but then there might be one or two people who suggest something and you think, hang on, this could lead to a different idea and a different approach. So never ever be fearful of reaching out for ideas and talking to people and networking. And I think the other very important thing is ethics. I think if you're somebody who's not ethical, you're looking to use everyone else for whatever your dream, your idea is, I think it will fail. I think if you're doing, yes, what you want to do, but you're also taking into account what other people want to achieve, other people's well-being, positive outcomes for other people to help them on their journeys, I think that's the way you're going to build a really nice, lovely, collaborative, trustworthy group where ultimately everyone benefits. And again, within that, you'll have people willing to share ideas and ways through. So, yes, there are sticking points, but I think sometimes you've literally just got to trust in the fact that you will find a way through, as long as you don't just give into a black pit of despair, that you really are you really are going to eventually find a way through and problem solve. You might, my other half with life issues and that and things, sometimes will just take a walk to clear his head, and then, oh, there's a solution to the problem, there's the way through it, will just come to mind and follow up on it.
Thank you for your story. These lessons that Laura has learned can be applied to your life regardless of if you're an artist or not. You see, you can only be successful in something if you truly love it, and that means loving your work more than hating it. What you think is a negative thing could actually be your biggest strength. It could be the people that doubt you and curse you and make your life a living hell. They could be a massive blessing because they could give you the strength to stand up for yourself. How? Because they can help you find your true power. Understand what you stand for. Always do what you love, and do it with the view of making yours and someone else's life better. always worked selflessly. If you like this episode, then please share it with someone who you think needs to listen to this. As always, I'm Zafran Ahmed, and this is Whispers in the Wind, giving your stories a voice. Thank you for listening.